Thank you very much, Most Venerable Mahasangha, distinguished Prince in Dhamma. It came to my mind a Sanskrit stanzas. The translation is, a fool is respected in their own home. A master is respected in their own village. A king is respected in their own country. Knowledge is respected everywhere. Bhante Ji born in Sri Lanka, and he had been living in few countries, likewise India, Malaysia, and mostly in the United States. Today, we gathered here to respect, to honor his wonderful service for the humans. So, now you all victims in here, the stamp suing by Sri Lankan government to honor the Bhante Ji's wonderful service. Now it is time to give an opportunity to our monks in here to express their gratitude as well as to see Bhante Ji's services in different angles. So firstly, there is a group of, in here we have a lot of monks to speak in here, but concerning about the time frame, we have only 2 talks representing whole Sangha community. The first one of Bhante. He is Bhante Ji's long time friend and also one of another second generation monk and leading monk. Particularly, he is very close to Bhante Ji and Bhavana Society. Our great teacher Bhante Ji introduced a different retreat which we call monastic retreat, only for the monastic. The invitation given by this Bhante Kondanya, Hinbunde Kondanya, the chief monk of Staten Island Buddhist Vihara. Bhante Kondanya was asking from our teacher to have a retreat for the monks. So then since that day, even today, we have that monastic retreat. So therefore, this is an opportunity for Bhante Kondanya to use this opportunity to explain and show his different angle thoughts about Bhante Ji's wonderful service. Venerable Sir, podium is for you.
Thank you, Venerable Saddhajiva. Venerable Nayaka Hamdrune and Venerable Sirs, His Excellency, Ambassador, Mr. Mahinda Samarasinghe, and all the dignitaries. I'm very happy to be here this afternoon in this August meeting to especially appreciating the service of Venerable Nayaka Mahathera that Sri Lankan government issued this extraordinary stamp. That's extraordinary because, as our ambassador mentioned, only stamp appreciating the service to the living person. Nayaka Hamdru is a great teacher for all of us, not only for us, but for the world. Buddhists who are appreciating the Dhamma. So he used to travel around the world and was teaching throughout his life, especially 55 years that he was here. that you heard a lot from our previous speakers, yet I'd like to mention, when we think of the brief history of Buddhism in America, Buddhists came to America in 1850 with the Chinese immigrants. First temple was built in 1853 in San Francisco by one of the Chinese companies. By 1875, I was reading, there were 8 temples in San Francisco, Chinatown area. By 1900, there were more than 100 temples in West Coast. But 1965, first Theravada temple established. That was in Washington, D.C. So in that temple, with the invitation of Venerable Mahanayaka Thero, Mariha Panyasika Mahanayaka Thero, Nayaka Hamdruo, Bante G, his pet name I like to use, so came to Vihara 1968. From that time onwards, slowly, Theravada temples started existing. I was just checking with the audience, there's a Venerable Dhammasiri mentioned, the Cambodian monk mentioned, 1977, their Theravada first temple was established. So, however, very slowly, it began to grow. And having that was happening, Nayaka Hamdru turned around to another direction. What was it? Now, being a city dweller, he wanted to move into forest dweller. He chose to live in the forest. So doing so, he built this wonderful Bhavana Society, where many people can learn the Dhamma. We know that at the early part of our lives here, we are living in a culture where you need proof. Without proof, you will not take anything. Especially, I feel sad about when I see the children. They don't believe when we are talking the Dhamma. They don't understand. So not only the children, even the adults. I'm not talking about the Buddhist. We used to be around, seeing us. We were living in places where many people screamed at us, throw things at us, sarcastically laughed at us. But nicely, ignorance was a blessing. Since we came in different cultural background, I think, in this multicultural society, we were not offended by it. We had patience. We were listening and we were smiling. But in the long run, slowly, they start seeing the Dhamma. How was that happen? There were a few shock waves passed through the country. 9/11, New York, there was a time blackout, and Asian tsunami. These things change the attitude of the people about the life. They start thinking. Life is not something that we are thinking of. Changing it, they start changing. They start searching for Dhamma. What is this life is about? I know Nayaka Hamdru has so much of experiences. He openly said how his young days was. He has mentioned it to the world by writing a book, one of his books. He didn't hide anything. So from his looking back to his own life, he can handle any question by any age person. I think Bhante always young students he is helping. Whatever the questions they have, he can answer to them. He can counsel them. That's a great skill that he has. And also for us as young monks, we all very appreciated. We did not have a vocabulary to teach Dhamma. We were struggling with the language when we were here at the beginning. So Bhante provided us those things by simply writing mindfulness play in English, mindfulness in play in impermanency, the books like that, 8 steps in about Eightfold Path. All those books provided for all of us to use in our teachings. Not only that, Bhante, as Bhante Sadhyajiva mentioned, he every year, he scheduled a monastic retreat. Very first few years, there are many monks came, but monks' life also with so many obstacles, so they not every time, every year everybody could come, but there are every year whoever we could, at least representing one of the temples, so monks used to come and learn and practice with him. That was a great blessing for all of us. We appreciate Bhanteji's service to the Sangha members as well as, of course, to the community, in the world community, not only the American community. For anybody who is willing to learn, searching for answers, he was helping, as we heard from Mr. Matthew few minutes ago. And also he took another bold step. That was ordaining the bhikkhunis. To give a chance, I believe he wanted to give a chance for them to experience monk's life. So he initiated it. Now I think it's slowly growing up in the West. And there are numbers of whoever ready, they can go and get their ordinations and become students of the Buddha or the teacher, and they can learn and they can share this Dhamma. We are all here to share the Dhamma with people of this country. Dhamma is Dhamma. It is not to put a label on anybody. We never try to put a label on anybody, but they can benefit. We know that from Buddhism they can benefit a lot in everybody's life, whoever ready for it. I know many of our friends there are many people who are not ready. They always have mentioned. Some people mentioned, once I remember one person mentioned to me, Bhante, once they get it, they will never leave it. One positive one. Another person have told me, I know it's beautiful, but I'm not ready yet. So this is the duality that's existing in the societies. So even though it is the truth, they can see the reality, but they could not do enough for what they were planning for. Yet, as monks, as our devotees, lay devotees, we all can serve our communities, sharing the Dhamma. Sharing is something joyful, and Dhamma sharing is more joyful if anybody could adopt their life and get the blessings of the teachings. So therefore, I don't take long time. I like to wish Venerable Dr. Henepola Gunarathana Thero good health to serve more, taking our lifetimes also if we could. Please, you are a very good teacher, honorable teacher. We are very much to share the Dhamma with. There could be many people coming after you, searching for it, as you did before, that in the ships, maybe in the plane, maybe in the other countries, you were traveling far and wide to share this Dhamma. May you have energy. May you have good health to continue to do your service. So sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you.
We don't take much time. One more speak would be here with representing the Sangha community. Bhante Ji is the first monk who obtained PhD in the United States as a residence monk. And the second monk, Bhante Rahula, Basnagoda Rahula, third monk who obtained PhD from the United States, is here, as well as fourth monk too. But he's the next generation leading monk. I kindly would like to invite my brother monk, Venerable Dr. Surakulame Pemarathana Thero. He's an adjunct professor to the Pittsburgh University and Ohio State University.
The Most Venerable Agamaha Pandita Dr. Bhante Henepola Gunarathana Nayaka Mahathera, and Most Venerable Maharagama Dharma Sri Nayaka Mahathera, and Most Venerable Karugastara Uparatana Nayaka Mahathera, and Most Venerable Himbunne Kondanja Mahathera, and Most Venerable Suduhumpola Siratana Nayaka Mahathera, and Most Venerable Aludgama Dhammajyoti Mahathera, and Most Venerable Dhammadeepa Mahathera, and Most Venerable Yogavachara Rahula Mahathera, and all other venerable monks in the gathering, and also Venerable Bhikkhunis who are representing the Theravada and Mahayana traditions, and His Excellency Mahinda Samarasinghe, the Ambassador of Sri Lanka to the United States, and also the other the representative from the Embassy of Myanmar, and also the Chief of Mission and the staff members of the Sri Lankan Embassy, and all other distinguished guests and devotees representing the Cambodia, Taiwan, Myanmar, and other Buddhist countries, and children. I'm standing here with deep gratitude to Bhante Ji for creating a foundation for a lot of us, the second or third generation of monks in the United States to teach the Dhamma. When Bhante came to this country, and he has to work from the very beginning, and no one was familiar with monks, and no one was very familiar with Buddhism. And so he had to prepare the ground before he actually planted the seed. So in Sinhala we call asaddano, right? But now we have English word, aswadumais, right? So Bhante Gunarathana aswadumized the American soil to be ready for Buddhism. So I'm so glad that I was able to use this word in the Sri Lankan Embassy. The few words that came to English language from Sinhala language at the aswadumais. So good example would be Bhante Ji, who aswadumized the American soil for Buddhism. So today I'm going to put our Bhante Ji's mission in historical perspective. Today we have talked a lot about Bhante Ji's service, but I'm going to give a little bit of historical perspective to see how we can see Bhante Ji's mission and his service in this country from a historical perspective. So I'm going to talk about the legacy of Sri Lankan monks. Because when we see Bhante Ji's service here, what we see actually the culmination of the legacy of Sri Lankan monks who are doing missionary services. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Sri Lankan monks, and I hope that the monks from other countries will not be unhappy with me because I'm going to talk about Sri Lankan monks. So the legacy of Sri Lankan monks actually started, from the time of the establishment of Buddhism in Sri Lanka. Although Sri Lanka is an island, from the very beginning, the monks and the nuns of Sri Lanka has a great interest in spreading the Dhamma beyond the island. It is not easy for them to travel beyond the island, but we can see from the very beginning they had that mission. So the most important thing that Sri Lankan monks has done to the spread of Buddhism is actually writing the Tripitaka, the words of the Buddha, in palm leaves. The committing Tripitaka into writing is the very important act, because only after this text was produced and they were able to be transported to other different countries. So in the first century of the Common Era, when Sri Lankan monks put the Tripitaka from oral tradition to palm leaves, and those Tripitaka was able to be sent to other countries, particularly the Southeast Asian countries. Not only that, actually, they also composed Pali commentaries and Pali sub-commentaries, and then they were also transported to the Southeast Asian countries, and then they were able to use them. So the Sri Lankan monks established, not only they put the Tripitaka into writing, they also established a system of interpretation of these Tripitaka by producing commentaries and sub-commentaries. And Sri Lankan nuns traveled to China as far as from the 8th century to establish nuns' order. So we can see the tendency of Sri Lankan monks, even though it's difficult, they travel. So they established the Mahavihara lineage of ordination in Southeast Asia too. Although the Southeast Asian countries, which used to be called Swarnabhumi, received first message of the Buddhism during the time of King Ashoka, the Theravada form of Buddhism was not established in the Southeast Asian countries until the medieval period, until the Sri Lankan monks traveled to those countries, and then the monks from those countries traveled to Sri Lanka, and then only they actually were able to clearly have the clearly Theravada tradition of Buddhism in those countries. So we can see during the 13th century, the Sri Lankan monk named Sumana, who's also actually a disciple of the first Sangharaj of Sri Lanka, Most Venerable Dimbulagala Kashyapa Mahathero, and he was traveling in northern Thailand and in establishing the Mahavihara lineage of ordination in that part of the country. And in the 14th century, the Sangharaj of that time in Sri Lanka, Venerable Dimbulagala Dipankara Mahathera, who's known as Udumbura Sami, was traveling in Myanmar, the Lower Burma, and in Thailand, and establishing the Theravada customs and Theravada lineage of ordination. So we can see how the Sri Lankan monks were doing this from the very ancient time. And of course, during the colonial period, when Sri Lanka was colonized first by Portuguese, and then by Dutch, and then later British, and of course this tradition was disrupted. There was a period of disestablishment and disrupted, and then a decline of monastic education. But after a while, the Sri Lankan monks themselves, with the help of the Buddhist and lay leaders, they decided to revive their tradition. Of course, we have to remember Most Venerable Velivita Saranankara Sangaraja Mahathera, who is also actually the same village as the Bante Ji, the same area of Bante Ji. So he is the pioneer of re-establishing our monastic order during the colonial period. And however, after some time, the monks and the lay Buddhist leaders in Sri Lanka realized that actually it is impossible for us to fight or maybe compete with the Western powers in terms of weapons. The best way to withstand the colonial pressure is actually to revive our own tradition. So around the beginning of 19th century, the Sri Lankan monks and the lay leaders decided not to go into any fight. After the Matale Kerala, they decided that's not going to work. So therefore, instead of fighting with weapons, they decided to revive their own tradition, and also they decided to give the best thing they can give to the world, which is the teachings of the Buddha. So they knew that we are not technologically advanced in terms of material science, but we are good in mind science. So we may be, although we may not be, we may be far behind the Western technological advancement, we are quite good at technology of the mind. So therefore, the monks started to revive this tradition and learn these techniques, and even started to teach these techniques to Western scholars. So here we should remember the great American Henry Steele Olcott, His Excellency Ambassador mentioned a while ago, and he played a very important role in helping Sri Lankan monks to teach this Dhamma to the Western audience. So as a part of the 19th century Buddhist revival, the Sri Lankan monks started to teach Buddhism to Western scholars. So there were, and I will just mention a few names actually. So Sri Lankan monks who were well versed in Dhamma, well versed in Pali language as well as English language, communicated with Western scholars, including Henry Steele Olcott and then other scholars, and they taught those scholars Pali and the Dhamma. So Venerable Hikaduwe Sri Sumangala, Venerable Bulatgama Sri Sumanadisa, Venerable Vaskaduwe Sri Subhuti, Venerable Yatramulle Dhammarama, Venerable Polwate Buddhadatta, and Venerable Dodanduwe Sri Piratanatissa, and Venerable Radgama Sri Saddhananda Thero, and then Venerable Gintar Panyananda. Those are the few names. And just to give you a few examples, one of the first English translation of Dhammapada to English is Vincent Fussball's translation of Dhammapada, which was published in 1855. And Vincent Fussball was a student of Venerable Vaskaduwe Subhuti Mahathera. And the first Pali English dictionary was produced by Robert Childers in 1970. He's also a student of Venerable Vaskaduwe Subhuti and Venerable Dharmarama, Yatramuli Dharmarama. So they learned Pali and Dhamma from Sri Lankan monks. And if you read the first Pali and English dictionary, and you can see in the preface how they mention these names of these monks, how they learned Pali. So although that time Buddhist monks did not travel beyond the country, they actually teach in these Western scholars Pali and Buddhism, and therefore Sri Lankan monks were able to spread the Dhamma beyond this country. Of course, we should remember the great contribution done by Rhys Davids and also Mrs. Caroline Rhys Davids, who established Pali Text Society in 1881. And Rhys Davids also learned Pali from the previous monks that I just mentioned. And so after they established Pali Text Society, of course, Pali texts were edited and then translated, and of course, many Western people were able to read the direct teachings of the Buddha and learn Buddhism. So Sri Lankan monks played a very important role, even in the modern era, to bring Buddhism beyond its country. And when the Western powers bring technology and science to Sri Lanka, Sri Lankan monks were able to give them the science of mind and the important teachings of the Buddha. So we should remember the role of Anagarika Dharmapala here, and he is the one who actually traveled to Western countries. For the most of the Western countries, he is the first Buddhist to travel, and then he gave a lot of lectures and then gave a very good impression of Buddhism, especially in the U.S. also when he attended the first World Parliament in 1893. So the first Buddhist vihara, first Theravada Buddhist vihara was established in the Western countries, was the London Buddhist Vihara, which was established in 1926. And when I read Bhanteji's autobiography, Bhanteji was born just a year after this London Buddhist Vihara was established. So, and when Bhanteji was born, actually he was born in a very rural area, and it's inimaginable how this little village boy had a dream, not only to become a monk and not only to teach the Dhamma, and he had a dream of teaching Dhamma in English. And if you read his autobiography, he had this crazy dream when he was a little boy. And then when he shared his dream with his family members and his relatives and friends, they all laughed at him. But today, you see what has happened, this dream of this village boy. So, although he was born in this rural area, and he was able to move through this education, and we have to remember here the Vidya Lankara Pirivana in Kelaniya, and that Pirivana is also the one of the educational institutions came out as a result of the Buddhist revival. So Bhante Ji was a production of Vidya Lankara Pirivana. So as I mentioned, now Bhante Ji represents the culmination of this, this tendency, this mission of Sri Lankan monks to bring Buddhism beyond its country. And of course, in the modern era, we hear number of key names, number of key Sri Lankan monks who actually worked as missionary monks, who worked outside of Sri Lanka. I will just mention a few of those names: Venerable Valpura Rahula Mahathera, Venerable Hammalava Saddha Tissa Mahathera, Venerable Kirindesri Dhammananda Mahathera, and also Venerable Kurunagoda Piyatissa Nayaka Thera. And all these are some of, few key monks. But Bhante Ji exceeds all these monks in terms of his service and influence. When we look at Bhante Ji's mission and his service, it looks like he combined seemingly opposing two roles together. I'll just mention just two. One is in traditional and Sri Lankan monastery training, we have this concept of the monks choosing different roles. One role is called Gantha Dhura, which is the study monks, the learned monks. The other one is called Vipassana Dhura, the monks, the meditative monks. So usually monks will choose one. Either you become a scholar monk and teaching and well versed in the Dhamma, or you will become a meditative monk and do not pay much attention to study, but purely on meditation. But what we see in Bhante Ji's life is actually he combined these two dhuras, and he's both Grantha Dhura monk and also Vipassana Dhura monks. And he was well versed in the Dhamma, and he has, even his PhD dissertation is about the textual definition of the meditation. He was well versed and a scholarly monk, but at the same time he has these deep meditative insights. So we see two roles in one person here. And the other one is actually the traditional monk and a modern monk. We see that traditionally, how the traditional monks will like to preserve the tradition, and they are very stick to these traditional norms and customs. And modern monks try to adapt to the modern situation, sometimes, letting go of some of the traditional, customs. But what we can see in Bhante Ji's life is this somehow nice collaboration of this both the traditional and modern monk. When you talk to him, his thought, his vision, and his ideas are very, very modern, modern than our young monks. But how he conduct himself and how he present himself has a very traditional look. So he brought these two opposing roles into one person, and he's actually very bold, and he's very progressive in his presentation, in his service. But at the same time, he's able to maintain the essence of that Buddhist tradition. So that is why he outshines all other meditation teachers in this country. There are big names when it comes to meditation field. There are great meditation teachers, Western meditation teachers. But when you place Bhante Ji among all these key top meditation teachers, he outshines them because he was able to maintain the essence of the tradition. So therefore, no matter how many meditation teachers are producing books and coming out, but Bhante Ji outstands all of them because his ability to somehow retain this traditional essence. So that is, therefore it's a great example for all of us. Recently, Bhante visited our Pittsburgh Buddhist Center on a private visit. So during that time, I had very good, fond memories of nice discussion. So one day, I asked one question in one evening, Bhante, what do you think about the key moments in your service? What you consider as most important services that you have given to this country during this, 53 years of service? Now he mentioned one thing that I did not expect. And he considered, of course, he has done so many, services, establishing the Bhavana Society. But he mentioned this: he established a sima, a chapter house, to perform monastic rituals in the Bhavana Society. And he said that the Sima, the chapter house, is actually like the womb for the monks, because the monks are produced within the boundaries of Sima house, chapter house, Uposatha Ghara. And he said that he considered the establishment of the Uposatha Ghara, the Sima, at the Bhavana Society, and then giving ordination and higher ordination to American men and women in that place is what he considered as one of the key services that he has given. I completely agree with that. And because he produced this Sima and he produced Western monks, and there are few key Western disciples of him preaching the Dhamma, and including Venerable Sona and Venerable Dhammaratana and a few others, and establishing their own temples in different places. And also the Buddhist nuns, some of them are also here. So I think that is the great, in 1989, the establishment of the Sima, he considered himself as a great service, because thanks to Bhante, now the Sasana is established in this country. I remember in the Mahavansa, when the king Devanampetisa asked from Venerable Arahant Mahinda whether the Sasana is established in this country after he built all these things, Venerable Arahant Mahinda's answer was that whenever the Sasana will be established in this country, when a Sri Lankan who Sri Lankan is ordained in his own country and recited the Vinaya. So the Venerable Arahant Mahinda also considered the ordaining of a Sri Lankan monk within the Sri Lankan soil in that chapter is the mark of the establishment of Buddhism. I think it is very true, very correct for Bhante Ji to think about this establishment of this Sima and ordaining American men and women in that place as his great service. So today we are so thankful as Bhante Ji is giving us, has prepared this land, this ground for us. All these monks who are presenting here are working, and they are doing their service thanks to Bhante. So Bhante, truly you aswadumized American soil. So I'm very thankful to you. You did all the hard work. You tilled the ground, did the hard work. Now we have the opportunity to plant the seeds, and then in future reap the harvest. So we are so thankful, and particularly as a Sri Lankan monks, I'm so proud of Bhante Ji, because when you talk about Buddhist leaders, Buddhist monastic leaders, we talk about His Holiness Dalai Lama, who is from the Vajrayana tradition. We talk about Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh from the Mahayana tradition. When it comes to Theravada tradition, the name is very obvious, Bhante Gunarathana. So thank you very much, Bhante, for giving such a great, good name for Sri Lankan monks and creating such a good image of monks in general, so we can work here with confidence. So from the bottom of my heart, I express my gratitude, and also on behalf of all the monks, I wish Bhante more good health and more strength and more courage to continue to bless us, continue to guide us. May Bhante be healthy. Thank you. Thank you, Venerable Saddha Jiva, the fourth monk to receive PhD, to give me for this chance.
Now let's continue to immerse ourselves in a cultural tapestry with another captivating Hevisi performance, a rhythmic celebration of our heritage performed by Ceylon bearer led by Mr. Indika Attanayaka. Hevisi performances play a pivotal role in religious ceremonies, especially during festivals and processions at Buddhist temples.
we are talking about establishments of the Buddha Sasana, not only Buddha Sasana, even Sri Lankan culture is established in here because all these kids born in this country. But they did wonderful things. Thank you very much. So now we are ending our ceremony today, but our ambassador, Mahinda Samarasinghe and Mr. Rohan, Deputy Ambassador, was asking me, Bhante, what do you think about Bhante Ji can speak? Then I said, maybe, sometimes I know if he start to give a lecture, he can continue at least 3 hours. So now, without listening to him, no one ready to leave from this place. We all are waiting to listen to him. Brand new something. There would be something very brand new things because he reads every day. He writes books even today. The next one is on the way. 2 weeks ago came out one particular book which we call Impermanence in Plain English. Next one would be Dependent Origination in Plain English on the way. So today, now, is the wonderful ceremony to honor Bhante Ji's wonderful service. Now, let us take opportunity to listen to him.
Dear Venerable monks, Your Excellencies, and ladies and gentlemen, when I listen to all these talks, honored bestowed upon me, I felt very, very humble. I feel I'm a very small speck of dust in the universe. So many people express their sentiments today, this afternoon, indicating how much monks, Sri Lankan monks, have contributed to the spreading of Buddhism in the West. I heard historical perspective and personal experiences from various very wonderful teachers. I must be thankful first to my mother who owned my body. Then I must thank my teacher, Venerable Kiribat Kumare Sonuttara, who ordained me. I must thank all my teachers in Vidya Sekara Pirivani in Gampaha, and all my teachers in Vidya Lankara College. And then I must thank individual monks who prepared me for missionary work. One is Dr. Paravahara Vajranyana Nayaka Thero, who established Buddhist Missionary College in Colombo. And he trained us for 2 years, and then he himself was a very far-sighted, highly educated, very compassionate monk. And he has such a great vision that he selected me to send to India. Thanks to him, I served in India with untouchable people who were rejected by the society. While I was working there, Venerable Kirinde Dhammananda visited India, he saw me and he immediately invited me to Malaysia for 2 years. I worked there for 10 years in various capacities in temples, organizations, families, and youth movements. Then another far-sighted, most compassionate, very great person with integrity is Venerable Madihe Panyasiya Mahanayaka Thero. This venerable monk had such a wide vision that he selected me to send to the United States. Since I came to this country, I have been working with all sorts of people of all walks of life and gained great deal of experience. I was not polished missionary monk. By working with these people, associating with great persons in this country, traveling almost every state to the United States, I learned a great deal. I must thank these people, my mother, father, teachers, and these three particular individuals. Venerable Kirinde Dhammananda, a very compassionate monk. Venerable Paravahara Vajrayana, very far-sighted, highly educated monk. Venerable Madhya Panyasiya Mahanayaka Thero, very far-sighted, highly intellectual, bent upon missionary work. I must thank these three first. I must thank all my friends who gave me courage, who helped me with their own experiences. I don't have students. All those who learn Dhamma, meditation from us are my friends. The one who spoke earlier, Mr. Flifstein, is one of my friends. Without his support and dedication, generosity, insight, motivating factor, power, I wouldn't have been able to start a meditation center. I thank him very much. All those who have put obstacles in our way are all my friends. By putting obstacles on my way, they open my heart, mind to maneuver all these things and avoid difficulties, problems and failures. And they all are my friends. I thank them. I don't have enemies. All are my friends. Friends, I must thank all of them to make this occasion possible. I am not a politician. I don't know people who decided to honor me with the stamps. All this happened behind my back as a secret. But occasionally I smelled the smoke. And behind that is my student, I call him my student, is at Kandavaka Saddhajiva monk. And he organized all this and got support from our Excellency in our Sri Lankan embassy. And I don't know how he influenced the Sri Lankan government, Sri Lankan postal departments to issue a stamp in my honor. I don't think I deserve any of these honors. In my view, I have done nothing to deserve all these words that all of you very compassionately expressed. But I thank you, however, your very kind, generous heart and words. And I also must thank people in the United States. All these 55 years I worked, I had been out of Sri Lanka almost 70 years. Since 1955, January 15th, I have been out of Sri Lanka, and I did not do very much for Sri Lanka. Some of the Sri Lankans even don't know me. But somehow politicians and government workers came to know me through some media. And then they decided to ask our Excellency Mr. Samarasinghe mentioned to issue a stamp while I am alive. I think this is an invitation for me to depart very soon. So that they can talk about me that we issued a stamp in so and so's behalf. Now, I must thank these anonymous people. I don't know them, they don't know me, and yet they did this honor. And so I thank those who are known to me, like my parents, teachers, and so forth. I thank my friends who I have